Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Secondary School Advising's Alumni Parent Panel. We are thrilled to have parents and caregivers with us this evening. We're just going to give it another 30 seconds for those, dropping off kids, bringing them home, dinners, all the things, just giving them a minute to enter the meeting room, and then we'll start. Okay, for those who have just joined us this evening, thank you again for coming to our Secondary School Advising Alumni Parent Panel. We are joined this evening by four incredible parents who were sitting in your space, perhaps in in their living rooms or in their car driving their student from practice and jumping onto this exact event just last year, and they are representing four different types of schools. We're going to have a boarding school, public school, parochial school, and a day school. We did have a technical vocational school. The family did have a conflict for this evening, so I will be able to add some additional information on that. And actually, there's been some changes with the policies for that admission. So it is a little bit different than last year anyway. But without further ado, I do want to get into introducing the most important people of this evening, which are our panelists. So you're going to have speaker view this evening. I'm going to ask each of the panelists to share their name, when their student graduated from Carroll, and what school they are at. So Dave, I'll start with you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Dave. My son Ashi graduated from Carroll last year after 7 years at the lower school and middle school, and he's currently at Gann Academy in Waltham.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us this evening. And Lauren.
Hi, my name is Lauren, and my kids, Sydney and Eli, both attended Carroll for middle school. So they were there 6th through 8th and graduated last June. They both are now over at Needham High School.
Thank you, Lauren. Sage.
Sorry, my iPad wasn't letting me. It wasn't recognizing my cold finger. I'm Sage. I am mother to Elin and Finley, who graduated last June from the Carroll Middle School 8th grade. And they were sort of lifers at Carroll as well, starting in 2nd grade. And both girls arrived at Proctor Academy for where they started this fall.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Scott.
Hi, Scott Carson. My son Brendan graduated last year, and he is at Lawrence Academy. He was at the Carroll School for 9 years, and so he started in 1st grade, graduated in 8th grade, and then we made the decision to go on to the upper school, and he graduated last year again, and he's at Lawrence.
Wonderful. Thank you, Scott. I'd also like to introduce at this time the other members of Carroll's secondary school advising team, who I believe you all know quite well. But without a doubt, this evening event tonight, as well as all of the other events, wouldn't happen without this full team court press that we are supporting all of you. So Carolyn and Francie, I would love for you to unmute yourselves and reintroduce yourselves.
Hi, good evening. I'm Carolyn Crandall. I am a secondary school advisor at Carroll Middle School.
Thanks, Carolyn.
And good evening. My name is Francie Fenton. I am the secondary school advisor on the Wayland campus. Thank you for joining us.
We feel quite fortunate to have such a dynamic group of people and have such incredible parents with us this evening. And just to share a little bit of the logistics of the evening, it's going to be a really relaxed atmosphere. We're going to have a set of questions that the panelists will essentially all weigh in on. There may be some that are specific to particular schools. We would also welcome the opportunity for you to ask some questions in the Q&A. We will do our best to field those questions throughout the evening and or save a little bit of time at the end to answer those. And if not, Carolyn, Francie, and I can certainly get back to you, or we may end up reaching back out to our lovely panelists to get some feedback on some of the questions. So I think, again, because you really don't want to hear me speaking this evening, the most important thing is that we hear from these wonderful parents. So I'm going to start with the question of, really, I'm just going to jump right in. Please share some wisdom that you have about open houses, applications, and creating that school list. So I'm going to just to start the evening getting things going because everybody's kind of muted, and then we're going to have people just jump in as they want. But I will just start with Dave, just going on my left. If you don't mind. Sorry, I put you right on the spot, Dave.
Lamb to the slaughter, no problem. So first of all, I think testament to the team there. What was tremendously helpful for us was to have the list of schools with some advice on which ones we should be focusing on for our son. My advice is to jump on that early. As we started to expand the list of schools we were initially looking at, were a little bit late to the game. And sometimes when we wanted to participate in open houses, there was a cap on them. And sometimes there wasn't the opportunity to participate in a tour. So I would say do your due diligence early on, and once you've assembled that list, take a look at the calendar for the various admissions departments at those schools. And then also pay close attention to the application process, because while some schools have the same standards and requirements, others have things like graded essays that not everyone has. So that was another thing that we learned late in the game. So learn from my mistakes.
Great advice, Dave, on the graded essay and just like getting in early on those visits. I'm gonna jump around just to keep it interesting. Sage, you wanna weigh in on this?
So I don't know. So Elin and Finley, we have a two household situation. So we were trying to navigate geographics and sort of what would be the best for both girls. So we really touched in all sorts of different spheres of types of learning settings for the girls. We we didn't attend that many open houses just because of our own family logistics, but we reached out to alumni, we went on Instagrams, we read websites, we ordered materials from the schools. We went to, local high school games, and, we really just tried to see and feel as much as we could from all of these different places. Knowing that you're Carroll parents, you're probably in a similar boat that I was. Trying to get the girls to write their essays was perhaps the biggest challenge in this entire process. So I recommend starting that early, but saying, hey, you need to write your application essay, that's way too big of a thing. So we would do little brainstorming things and, just break that process down into small pieces. Because for both of my girls, that was very overwhelming, and that was sort of a really challenging thing to get going on. And the most important thing is ask for help. Ask questions, ask for help, and know that the answer is not going to present itself to you right now. It's going to present itself in many, many months. So it's a marathon, and you just got to pace yourself. So that's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Sage. I appreciate your feedback on getting a jump on the essays and also compartmentalizing it so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. Lauren, would you like to weigh in?
Sure. I mean, I think that Dave and Sage had really good advice. I wish that they maybe gave that to me last year, some of this. So what else would I say? The other things I would say, I think from the moment we got to Carroll, we really kind of took, I don't know if you guys remember, when we started, the first thing Renee presented to us was all about how we should trust the process and trust the school. And we kind of took that to heart with this whole process as well. And so we really listened to the recommendations for each of our kids and where they thought would be good fit. And what I would also say is just to keep a really open mind throughout the process, which is what we really tried to encourage our kids to do. And just to say, you know, like we may, like to Sage's point, like who you are right now might be a little different from 6 months from now, and to really just keep an open mind. And I would say as much as possible as you are able to visit, that really did help clarify things for our kids too, being able to see campuses, to meet other kids, to go to a sports game in some cases. They were able to like meet kids there. And that just really helped them to see, like, could I really see myself in this school setting? And so it's really hard to make that happen, especially if some of them are at a distance, but it really did help clarify things quite a bit for our family.
Great. Thank you, Lauren. I really also appreciated the input on like wishing you had some of this information, which is why I love having this event, because I think for us too, we hear your input and now can share this with families maybe that weren't here able to join in this evening. Scott.
Um, all great points. I think I will highlight Lauren's last point of going to the campuses and trying to go to an event while you're on those campuses to really just get a feel of what each school is like culturally. I think you really can get a good sense when you spend the time on the campus. And then I think two additional points I would make. Carroll does a great job of either hosting Zooms or inviting schools in to speak on campus that may not be on your list. And so uh, I would encourage you to attend those and listen in on those. And probably the last and maybe most important for us was the Carroll community. There's so many people that have been in your position at the schools you're looking at. So if you can find a Carroll family that's at that school that you're considering to get the inside scoop of what was the transition like, what's comparable, what's different, incredibly helpful for us in our process, and hopefully that helps you as well.
I love that. Thank you very much, Scott. And I would say, and I think Carolyn and Francie would agree, what's wonderful is so many of the schools do have Carroll alum. One great piece of advice would be to call the admissions office if you are looking to get in touch with the Carroll family and ask them first, do they have an ambassador, like a parent ambassador, who's at the school that would be willing to talk to you because they've already gotten their email, their phone number, and they're willing to talk to Carroll families, and their student has been at the school. So I think it would be a great stepping stone if that's something you're interested in. So thank you all very much. Was there any, this came up 2 years ago, I think, a question on strategies that families had. Well, hey, I'm going to back up. Sorry. Did anyone have any advice on the interview process or feedback, I want to say, for families now, or just something they want to comment on, just like when their student went through it? Were they nervous? Did they end up being great? Did you utilize Carol's opportunity for practice interviews? Would anybody like to weigh in on that? I didn't
I'll
want to
jump
jump
in.
past that whole process.
I'll jump in.
Okay,
We
Scott.
Brendan certainly utilized the resources available through Carroll and spent a lot of time with different individuals internally at Carroll preparing for those interviews. Obviously, um, you can continue that at home, but to have the resource at the school when you have different breaks to sit down, and the resources at Carroll know the types of conversations that the student's going to be having at each individual school. Amazing resource. So certainly we utilized it and would encourage others to.
Great, thank you. Anyone else want to jump in on that? Sage is.
My hands are so dry and cold. So just in terms of the interview, I would say the most important thing is to practice. And also, if you have a handful of schools that you're really, really excited about and you think might kind of be your sort of your more top choices, I wouldn't necessarily have one of those schools be your first school you go and have an official interview visit with, because that, at least I'm speaking for my two girls, that felt really kind of big and scary. But once they had one interview process, tour, that kind of thing under their belt, they had a lot more confidence. And then in terms of the private school side of things, as a parent, you will also be interviewed. And the most important thing, in my opinion, is just to be real about your kid and your family. Be honest about what you see, what you feel your child might need, or how you hope for them to grow. Because remember, this is about partnering with a school that's going to be the right fit for the school wants the right kid for them, and you need the right school for your kid. So it's if you're not being real and upfront with them, it's not really going to work out in the long run. So
Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to weigh in, or do we cover? Oh, yes, Dave.
Yeah, I would just echo what was already said and say how appreciative I was of how turnkey it was. My son Ashi did practice interviews with Carolyn and felt really prepared. I can't speak for other people's children, but mine had zero interest in working with me or his mom at home. But felt prepared after going through that at school. And similarly, I saw there was a question in the chat about the graded essay, which I alluded to, and that also was very turnkey. Charlene, maybe you can speak to it. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but I know that Ashi's advisor provided that to us. We didn't end up needing it for the school that he went to, but I know that that was made available. So each of those steps were taken out of our hands and made very turnkey by the team at Carroll.
So what I will say on the essay is that at the upper school and the middle school, the upper school is definitely a high school prep, like it is ninth grade, and it's a ninth grade, excuse the dog barking. There is a ninth grade curriculum schedule, there's study hall, there's more independence, which is what ninth grade is. So there's a little more time to have timing, I would say, during the school day to brainstorm and work on some of those. Correct me if I'm wrong, Francie. At the middle school with a more jam-packed day, what we do ask, and I would say Ashley was quite prepared, is for the student to work on their essays at home, get it into that format that is enough along, and then with advance notice, reach out to their advisor or ELA teacher and ask if they have time to give feedback. And I'm sure, just like Dave said, I don't know an ELA teacher that doesn't want to help your children. So, but just give them the time. It's a crazy time of year right now, but have your students work on that and brainstorm in advance. And Carolyn and I at the middle school, as well as Francie as the upper school, are happy to brainstorm. So I think that helps, right? Does that something else I wanted to ask was if there was any tips if any student was resistant on engaging in the process initially, because I do know we hear sometimes that they love Carroll, maybe a little nervous about leaving Carroll, and although they are thinking about the next step, some students find it just like very overwhelming to think about looking at all the schools. So are there any tips for engaging your student in the process and keeping them engaged? Because someone said it's a marathon, it's a lot of work, and we're all trying to defray some of that stress and for you. So if anyone would like to offer some advice to parents on that, we'd love to hear from you. You can just unmute and jump in.
I'll start. I think my advice would be keeping your child very engaged in the process. I think as most parents are compelled to solve problems and challenges for their kids, and sometimes we forget to keep the kid kind of lockstep with that process that you're in. But I found for us it was helpful when we really did asked Brendan for his opinion on a variety of topics and really engaged him in and kept him in the process from start to finish. And I think we got better as time went on, and we went through it twice when we were finishing up at 8th grade, and then when we were wrapping up 9th grade at Carroll. But it was that engagement that really helped keep him motivated throughout the marathon process.
Thanks, Scott.
I'll sort of piggyback on that. In that choice is so important. We know that for our kids, giving them a choice also then will lend itself to ownership of the process. So you know, giving sort of, I have identical twins who are profoundly different, and making sure that they each had their own journey and process was incredibly important. So I could actually use that to my benefit and say, hey, you know, let's just, you know, Elin seems a little bit more interested in this school, but Finn, why don't you just come along and let's check it out just in case, and vice versa. And so I think choice is really important. And I kind of lost my train of thought, but you get the gist.
I love choice. And
Yeah,
Lauren, I know
yeah.
you wanted to add something on that as well.
Well, it was just interesting because today my kids did not have school today, so I had the pleasure of having them home. And I had a chance to ask them. I said, "What advice would you give to the parents tonight when I'm talking?" And they did actually talk about how they felt like we did a really good job of really engaging them and listening to them in the process, which I was like, hey, thanks, I did something right here. But I think, but they really, in the least shocking, you can only imagine Carolyn, like Eli giving me this sort of input, but like he very strongly was like really encouraging them to, you know, to really listen to their kids, because their kids do better understand who they are now. And so that really was, by the way, what happened in our process. There was like some resistance in the beginning, not so much because they were wanting to leave Carroll, but because they kind of had an idea in their heads of where they should be. And I really tried to encourage them to say, well, let's just explore a few options and see what feels right. And it did end up being very clarifying for them along the way.
Thanks, Lauren. I appreciate it. Going to move on to the next question, which is, or topic, which is always on the mind of families leaving Carroll, is the kind of support students who leave Carroll might be receiving. And all of you could be in a very different space. So it'd be great if we could go around and you could all share the support. If I didn't say this and you all didn't figure it out into the audience, how amazing, we have 4 parents, but 6 students were actually reviewing in terms of the search, the support. So it could all be very different. So how about whoever would like to start on the support that was offered and what they're receiving at their current school?
I'll jump in.
Okay, Dave.
I think for us, in our conversations with the team at Carroll, we were advised that Ashi would need fairly minimal support. But we were nervous about him coming out of the cozy confines of Carroll and being elsewhere and potentially struggling a little bit. And we made the decision to front load the support he's receiving in the fall semester, under the assumption that it was going to be easier to have him have too much support and potentially peel away versus realize in the middle of the first semester that he needed more. It was also interesting in going through that process and discussing with the staff at the Learning Center at GAN about what kind of cadence he was going to need. One of the comments that came from them was, you know, we're happy to have as much of him as possible, and that their experience was that the Carroll kids ended up becoming almost de facto employees of the Learning Center because they had the skills and tools and the scaffolding that they had learned from their time at Carroll. And I'm not even familiar with all of the terminology, but there were anecdotes of the Carroll kids saying to the other kids, like, oh, you don't know an XYZ? I don't, you know, it might have been a graphic organizer, but there were tools and terminologies that were inherent in the learning experience for the Carroll kids that were new to some of the other kids. And that piece was actually exciting for me, for my kid to potentially be in the role of a teacher with his fellow students and help share some of what he learned. And some of that has borne out in his short time there. But that was the approach that we took, and so far seems to be working out.
Great. So what I'm hearing from you is you front loaded with some support that you felt that would enhance what was already provided at Carroll, and then they guided you on peeling that back as needed for Ashi. Great.
Exactly. Yep.
Who else would like to jump in on this?
I'm happy to go.
Thanks,
Well,
Sage.
the first off, just in terms of finding the right fit, in terms of what that support might look like, Charlene gave us this phenomenal list of kind of these different ranges of places that might be the you know, the landing pad for each of the girls. And so within that framework, we knew that both girls were going to need some level of support, but with an opportunity to peel that back as they grow and mature through high school. And I'll speak to Proctor since that's where both girls are. They're both in learning skills support there, and they meet with they have their tutor, and it's basically a 2-to-1 situation. And the goal is hopefully eventually by the time they're a senior that we might be peeling back some of that kind of, it's equivalent to 1 full class right now, but hopefully in time we'll be peeling that back as they're ready to flap those little wings even stronger. So for me, having the girls have that option to kind of flex their muscles as they grow and develop was really important, because that's where they are right now.
Great, thank you. And Lauren, what about your two wildly wonderful and different students?
Yeah, so it's similar. So having looked actually at almost all of the schools that are here, it's a similar sort of setup. Our kids have what's called skills 5 out of the 7 days of their cycle, so almost every day, and it's a small group, a sort of support, smaller support room where they can get coaching and support on assignments that might be harder for them, and help them with planning out their week and all of that stuff. And they found that to be tremendously helpful. Eli actually still gets a little bit of reading support from school, which, whether or not he's going to stick with it or not, I don't know. And then they have a variety of accommodations that are available to them, like extra time taking tests, voice to text for writing. I mean, different things that Carroll had recommended when we went through the process, which have been utilized. They get audiobooks for many of their assignments, those kind of things, which have all been really helpful.
Great, thank you. And Scott?
Yeah, I will piggyback on Lauren's comments there. The accommodations at Lawrence Academy, same list. Also, maybe a little bit more time on certain tests and certain classes, which is helpful. At Lawrence Academy, there's a learning center. He has one-on-one sessions 2 times a week with an individual, which is incredibly helpful. And then I'd say one additional thing that I think Carroll really prepares all the kids for, and he's putting to good use at Lawrence Academy, is self-advocation. The Carroll kids are taught to self-advocate, and the way that manifests itself is, it could just be asking a teacher for clarification of something, or proactively asking for one of those accommodations, or even you take a test or a quiz. And what we've learned is if you go in and talk to the teacher after you take that quiz or test, they give you the ability to make up points. And that's not special to Brendan, that's to anyone. But the kids that leave Carroll leave with that skill set to know to advocate for themselves, ask additional questions, and it generates additional support for them.
Great, thank you. Dave, I saw you shaking your head. I know Ashi is pulled back on the support. Is he utilizing some accommodations, like extra time on some tests and maybe some other just basic or standard accommodations, I would say?
Yeah, he is. Most of the accommodations that were mentioned by both Scott and Lauren. So, audiobook as needed to replace reading when appropriate, extended time in tests and assignments in some instances, are all part of the package that he's making use of.
That's great. What I'm hearing, similar to when we hear, Carolyn, Francie, and I, when a Carroll student leaves an interview, if we get some feedback, we hear schools love having Carroll students because they know themselves as learners and they're willing to share. What I'm hearing is, on the flip side, they're also willing to ask so that other people will share information with them when they leave Carroll. So whether you're receiving a more moderate or more comprehensive support, or you're peeling back, you're still utilizing your resources and your strategies, but also might be having accommodations. So I think it's really important, because what I'm hearing from all of our panelists is that certain schools might have different accommodations. So you want to make sure it aligns with what your student needs. And if the student can't have it, it might not be the right place, right? So you want to make sure you find that right fit. I see Sage also
Yeah.
nodding on that.
Sorry, I was like, I don't want to forget. I'm like, oh, it's late, so I forget things. IEPs and documentation
I was
of
just going to jump onto the
supports.
IEPs.
Yeah, of supports. So we have gone through and kept the girls' IEPs and testing current with their local public schools, and that's really, really important. And for all of the schools that we are looking at and eventually applied to, we did send their most current testing, obviously, and their town IEP. And they also use that information in conjunction with everything from Carroll to develop their, for both girls, their proctor learning plan. So it really, it's a pretty comprehensive. They also do goal setting. And with the girls, which I think is really important too, because I know that was a really big Carroll thing of goal setting. And so again, it's that ownership thing. They put the girls in real ownership of their educational process and progress.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, Sage. And actually, I'm going to jump to Lauren and ask if she can speak a little bit about the wisdom regarding the IEP and or a 504. So we're not really, you could share if your students are on an IEP or a 504. It could be different in kind of how you manage that.
Sure. So we did maintain our IEPs while we were at Carroll. We had hoped, if it was the right fit, for our kids to return to public school because that's where they had been before. And so what I would say is that I was blown away by the IEP experience having Carroll involved. We had an educator in each of our meetings. They were two separate meetings for our two separate kids. And so in both cases, they had their ELA teacher. In one case, it was like an ELA teacher who also happens to be their small focus group teacher. So we had educators that really understood our kids, who were speaking to other educators on the Needham public side. And as a result, it was the most magnificent process. I was like, I wish this had happened all the time. But they really listened, and we ended up with two different IEPs for two different kids, which I have to say had not happened really before. And so we were pretty impressed with that and felt really good about the level of support that was being offered for our kids. And they had very different recommendations for the classes that our kids should be taking, which was also really interesting as well. And so I think I found the process to be reassuring after kind of having had some less than optimal experiences in the past. And we found that the support that's been recommended has been appropriate. And over time, as others have said, we may hopefully be able to peel some of that back. But for now, I think to transition from Carroll to a school of 1,600 where they are now, it's like such a big difference. Or I think it's like 1,200, whatever. I may have bounced that off a little bit, but a lot of kids. So a really big difference. So yes, it was really great. If there's specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And what I'm also hearing from this is that although there may have been a less than positive experience in the past, please don't discount if you're considering your high school, please don't discount what the high school might be able to provide, because in many cases, we have heard from families that the high school experience and even the special education department, what they can offer, can be very different. So something to keep in mind. And again, it's your individual journey.
Charlene, I would just say one more thing, which was interesting, which was, and this is one of the reasons, when Carolyn asked me to do this, I felt really like I needed to make time for this, which was that last year when I was listening to this, on the other end of the screen, I heard another parent talking about their own public school experience, and it really kind of pushed me to keep more of an open mind about it, because I had been pretty disenchanted, to say the least. And so I would say that, every town is different. Every kid is different in terms of what they need, but it was markedly different. And I think my kids are markedly different than when they were in elementary school. So they're just in a different place.
Great. Thank you for that. I'm going to ask each of you to go around and weigh in on a question that is often on parents' mind and students' minds is the foreign language waiver, and or did you have one? Are you exercising it, or is your child exercising it? Are they taking a foreign language, and how's it going? So whoever would like to jump in.
We would have been happy to avail ourselves of a foreign language waiver. Our son was pretty adamant that he wanted to take a foreign language. Um, I think driven largely by the fact that he has an older sibling at the same school that he's now at, and I think he wanted to have the same experience that his brother did. And he is at school with, I believe there's five of them that are from Carroll together. So it was a topic of discussion in the group. Hey, is your child going to be taking a foreign language? And I think most of them are so far. Knock on wood, it's been successful, but we definitely went into it with an open mind, and with in the back of our mind, the possibility that this wasn't going to be successful, but we wanted to we wanted to give him that opportunity since it was something that he was so adamant about.
Great, thank you, Dave. And so may I ask, the foreign language at GAN Academy is something that can be exercised. So it's not that no matter what, some schools you can't, like there is no chance to waiver, but you could have the option if you needed to.
Yeah, it's somewhat unique because taking Hebrew is inherent in the curriculum, and then
Yep,
students often additionally take another foreign
yep,
language, Spanish or French. But yes, there was that possibility as an option.
great. Thank you.
Um,
Scott?
I'll jump in here. Yes, similar to what Dave said, if a foreign language waiver had been available to Brendan, I think we would have taken it, and he would have taken it as well. A little bit different than Dave's situation, um, but Lawrence Academy did not make that offering available. You are required to take foreign language, and I will tell you that we are off to a surprisingly excellent start to our foreign language experience for Brendan. He's really enjoying the class. We got to visit a couple weeks ago and see him in the classroom with the teacher. The teacher's amazingly engaging, uses all kinds of different tools to engage the students and do things physically with bringing in props and video and dancing and singing. And it actually looked like a class I would have loved to have taken as a foreign language when I was a kid in high school. And we do have Brendan supplements a little bit of what he does with a third party tutor 2 days a week. And the tutor has been commenting that the foreign language approach that Lawrence Academy takes is amazing. And if you have to take a foreign language, their professional opinion is that's the way to teach a foreign language to kids, with the dyslexic mind.
Great, thank you. Lauren?
Both of our kids are taking a foreign language now. This is part of that. We went through this process with the school district when we were going through our IEP, and they recommended that they come in and take one of the classes are taught at different paces, and we opted to have them go in at a slower paced Spanish class for both of them. They're in two different classes. And I have to say, like, they just got their grades for the semester, and it was their highest grade. So it seems like kind of it's like shocking, and so we'll take it and we'll run with it. But they both seem to be enjoying it, and it seems to be working out. There's an absurd amount of Carroll kids that are at Needham High this year, and they all are taking different foreign languages for the most part and seem to be doing really well with it. And so it is interesting. I think the kids were excited to try.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Sage?
So the foreign language thing brings up a lot of fear for me because it was not my thing. So I was terrified going in thinking about my poor children having to take a foreign language. I took Spanish. It was awful. In the girls' IEPs, we kind of tinkered around the idea of a foreign language waiver. Their prior IEP said that they didn't have to do one. And we kind of said, well, you know what? They have so much structured language knowledge in that really sturdy tool belt that they have that, you know what, they're probably going to do just fine. And I was like, okay, well, do we try Spanish? Like their first trimester at school, like this was like giving me like panic attacks because I'm remembering my Spanish experience growing up. And similarly to Dave and Scott, it was going to parents weekend and being in Spanish class. We were dancing, we were passing like props around. I mean, it was so interactive and fun. And I thought to myself, wow, okay, this is really just an engaging, wonderful language experience. The girls are doing great. And they love it. They have a lot of fun. So all of the girls really couldn't care less. They're like, yeah, we'll take Spanish, but it was my anxiety. So I'm pleasantly surprised, and you'll be surprised at what your kid can most likely do. So
Thank you all very much. What I'm hearing, it shouldn't be a deal breaker. So is that your students all took the leap, took the risk, and it's going fine. But I would also offer the advice to families listening to check with the school what is their policy, because although you may have it in an IEP, you may have it in your neuropsych, there may be a policy that they are like, nope, all kids have to take it, but shouldn't be a deal breaker, because listen to the stories about thinking this might not work. And I think I need to go back and take a foreign language as well. And I will
yeah,
share a story from last year. A family on the panel, a parent had shared that their student chose to take, I think it was Italian, because Italian, nobody had had exposure to it that they were aware of. So they were all going to be starting at the same level versus jumping in where some kids had had some experience. So there's lots of ways to look at this, but we do hear, and I think Carolyn and Francie will also attest that we hear more often than not that the students are doing fine. Parents are a little more panicky about it, and the kids in the end are doing fine and know how to advocate for what they need. So thank you all. That was wonderful.
can I say one more thing on that?
Sure.
And ask the questions too, because there are frequently other ways to receive credit for your language, whether it be to do a school sponsored trip, or there's lots of other ways to kind of get the vegetables or the dessert. So ask the schools that you're curious about. Oh, do you offer, I see you offer a trip to China for the Mandarin kids. I know our old town used to do that, and the kids would receive a certain half credit or something towards their language requirements. So there's lots of other ways to kind of do that.
Great tip. Thank you. I'm also going to ask each of you to weigh in on your students' preparedness, your children's preparedness to take on high school after leaving Carroll. And again, this is just, being completely authentic on how they felt and feel, and you feel like it's going for them. And, it's a big leap. So we'd all love to hear from each of you on this.
I'll start.
Thanks, Scott.
So Brendan, we made the choice. He made the choice to do the Carroll Upper School. So I can speak from a couple of different perspectives, but I'll speak from the perspective of what he got in that year at the Carroll Upper School, which was, I think, an environment that was much more analogous to real life outside of the Carroll bubble high school experiences. And that's essay writing, that's more of a standard type of exam format where you go through a period of time and then you have an exam at the end of the process. um, Periods where you have open periods where you can fill those open periods with extra study, meeting with a teacher, and where you can utilize the school resources. And so what he and we as a family got out of the ninth grade upper school was a high degree of preparedness for when he arrived at Lawrence Academy.
Thanks, Scott. And I can just go around. How about Dave?
Sure thing. I've been tremendously happy with how prepared Ashi's been for high school. You know, I think I mentioned earlier about front loading the support. The truth is, he's utilized it predominantly as shoot, what's it called? Oh, NCLU in middle school, right? Like no child left unorganized is how he's taken the approach of the learning center to almost more of an executive functioning session and to get himself organized and make sure he's getting his work done, and less so getting support within those specific subjects. I think he feels confident and capable, and by extension we do on his behalf. So it's been nice to see him step into that role outside of Carroll and flourish. Because after 7 years there, I'll admit we were a little worried about what that was going to look like elsewhere, and we've been pleasantly surprised.
Great, thank you. Sage or Lauren, how do you feel on the preparedness of your students?
I can go. So with the girls at a boarding school, the preparedness wasn't even just academic. It was sort of this whole like, oh, you need to like do your laundry or like go pick your laundry bag up. And so there was like a lot of other kind of how do you do it sort of parts of their experience that were like, okay, we hope this works out. But the executive functioning stuff that they kind of really, again, in that tool belt that they have their organizer. They know when they need to do things, and so many of those skills were already sort of just in, just part of them. And they know how to advocate for themselves, so they have all these really good tools already. In terms of like academic preparedness, I think for both girls, which was expected, which I was already kind of expecting, was they had a harder time with math. Math is being taught in a little bit of a different sort of way, but they're really connected with their teachers, and their email. I mean, Finley is emailing her teacher Jimmy and saying, "I'm having a hard time with this. Can I come see you?" And for me, that is like better than an A+ on any test. And so they know what they need to do, and they know how to do it. And if they're not quite doing like the awesome grades, and they have great grades, both girls, they know how to get there, right? They like know how to read the map to get there, and they're just still kind of, finding their ley lines right now, which is expected. So
Thank you. Lauren?
Yeah, so this actually was, you beat me to it, Charlene. This is going to be one of my kind of words of wisdom. So I guess we'll get the preview now, which is I've discovered in the last 2 months that my kids are really different kids than when they started at Carroll. And so what I mean by that is they, first of all, better understand who they are as individuals and as learners. They are more comfortable with their learning differences and are quite proud of them. And as a result of those things, are better able to advocate for what they need. And so, like what I'm echoing what other people have said here, I see them emailing teachers. I see them setting up one-on-one meetings with teachers. I see them, utilizing after school and in school periods to check in with teachers. And, my whole thing all along is just like, try your best. And I don't really care about the grade. And I really have been seeing that like come through time and time again. And they ultimately did very, very well in their first semester in high school. So I'm thrilled. But I think that's like what I would say to parents who are sitting back right now, which I wish someone had said to me, which, there have been bumps in these first 2 months of high school. So I'm not going to sit back and say that this has been like the most smooth, beautiful transition. There's been bumps to go from a small, warm, comforting environment like Carroll to a much larger high school where there's all different diversity of kids and learners and all that stuff. It's not been easy at times, but what I've seen is a tremendous amount of resilience. And as a parent, like, I think that's like the most you can, ask, kind of what Sage was saying too just now, like, if your kid, like, and that's what I'm so proud of, is that they really just have come so far in what they're able to do for themselves.
Thank you. I think we're on the same wavelength because my next question was, this is all like wonderful. We want to know, are there any, pitfalls? And it's okay if you're saying no, it's been smooth, but I think families want to know the authentic experience on like not only like how prepared, and that's the question was, did they feel prepared, but were there some, and it's not necessarily about Carol preparing them, but was there some difficulty or just some challenge with any new environment, as I would imagine any high school student starting a new school?
I may just jump in here, and I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to touch on your specific point, Charlene, but I think that when we were leaving Carroll eighth grade, um, I think we felt like we had some more learning that was possible. There was more benefit that we could get out of the Carroll system. And it wasn't an easy decision because we had been there since first grade. And I think Brendan was ready to spread his wings and try something new. Um, but I think we also listened to all the amazing people at Carroll and recognized that there was more work to be done. He was still making some incredible strides at that tail end there. And so again, for us, and I know we're a little bit different story than others, and every story is everybody has their own path. Carroll Upper School made a lot of sense for us because it allowed him to continue to unlock some of those resources that were inside him that Carroll was just at the edge of unlocking eighth grade. And so for us, contemplating and then ultimately deciding to go to the upper school turned out to be a wonderful, wonderful decision. He was, like I said, very reluctant in the beginning, and as time went on, really enjoyed the process, enjoyed the kids that he met at the upper school, and it did unlock additional opportunity for him. And again, he's one scenario, one situation, but it did unlock additional opportunity for him in terms of the step beyond Carroll, which was Lawrence Academy for him. Um, the story is not completed yet, whether or not that's a success or not, but he's very happy. We're very happy so far there, and so I'll just make that point before we wrap up here.
No, thank you very much. That was actually going to be another question after this, was to share a little bit about your journey from middle to upper school. But I think sharing that part of the challenge was kind of knowing deep down that there was more developing, more growth that needed to happen to see what you're seeing now. So that really is almost like what it was like the challenge was to actually, as a family, realize, okay, we know that this is going to be the best case scenario. So we do appreciate that. And if you want to add on to that a little bit later, I'll give some more opportunity. And anybody else who would like to talk about some of the challenges, if there were any, with that segue into high school.
I wouldn't say there are any unforeseen challenges. I remember Finley in particular. Finley is not as technologically savvy as Elin, so I'm going to just compare my identical twins, which I know I'm not supposed to. So the technological jump for her was greater than it was for Elin, and I remember her saying, why don't they just use Google Classroom like Carroll? And she was like all bent out of shape. And then it's like any human being, right? Starting a new job or moving somewhere. It's like, you just got to figure out the way that this new community operates. And she was, again, I'll use the word resilient. Lauren, I think you use that word. It's true. The resilience factor for Finley to be able to say, oh, wait, no, okay, I can figure out this new platform. And now she's like a total pro at it. So I wouldn't say that there's unforeseen challenges. It's just that there will be challenges, right? And that's part of, if they weren't being challenged, then they're not going to be stretched. So, but making sure that they're supported too, and that's the goal.
Thank you. Did you want to add on anything, Lauren, on your, or Scott?
I just jump on Sage's point of the technology. We did have certainly a little bit of a hiccup in the early days where Brendan submitted a number of assignments on one platform, and he was he was later told that nobody had received them, 2 or 3 weeks later, and we it all resolved itself, but it was a technological glitch in the system, and I think he overcame it. But something to be aware of when you go into the new school is making sure you're understanding the technology side of the equation. We weren't paying attention to that. He wasn't paying attention to it, and he is now.
I think that there's just been, I don't even know how to even characterize this in a quick way, but it's interesting because Needham High School has been trying to combat AI in terms of they're now having students handwrite all of their assignments in class for their English. And so that just presented a really unique challenge, especially for Sid, because she really does all of her writing through voice to text. And it just took her having to advocate for herself with her English teacher. It's in her IEP. I mean, it wasn't like there, but just trying to figure out the solution that would work in this kind of new world that we're all in. And so, she got to where she needs to be, but there's just been times where there's teachers who are obviously not teaching the way that Carroll teachers do. And so she's just having to learn what she needs. In particular, it's Sid, I'd say even more, and ask for it. In some cases, there's a teacher who's like really fast paced in class. And so she's asked if there's a way afterwards for the teacher to share some of her notes so that she can focus more on the teacher rather than trying to take notes the whole time during class. And so there's just been things like that where, again, I'm just really impressed with the self-awareness about what she needs and then advocating for that with her educators.
Thank you. I feel like I'm hearing a similar message, which is that yes, high school is wonderful and there can be challenges, and your students are resilient, and give them the time and the space to dig into the resources that they have and help them dig those back out, because they've been away from Carroll for a couple months and then they have to jump into a new school and kind of reactivate all of, like, dig out the toolbox, dig in for it, and remember the things that help them be so successful at Carroll, right? And so I do appreciate that.
Can I say just one more
Yes.
thing on the
Yes.
challenge? Remember, we're not just talking academics too. These are social little beings who so much of our curriculum at Carroll is social emotional learning. So going into a new school environment, as any new environment, there can be bumps for kids. And it is a whole new crew of kids, right? They might have a crew of Carroll kids there that they already know. They may have an older brother, who knows, but there is so much learning, and that just being with a new cohort of human beings is a lot. But I will say they're prepared for it. I think social emotional, they know how to have conversations. They know how to operate within a group. So just to be aware that there will be growing pains socially, but that's okay. It's, it is high school, and they have the tools in their tool belt.
Thank you. And I know Lauren kind of jumped ahead with thinking about something she wanted to share, but I'm trying to be thoughtful of everybody's time, because I know personally, and I think Francie and Carolyn and our guests feel the same way, that we could just keep chatting all night, because I love hearing how the students are doing, the growth, the all of the pieces. I would love for you to share in closing, and we might have a little bit more time to talk about a couple of other things, but advice that you wish you had or thought you knew about now that you're in this position, you have this new lens, and something you want to share with families on the other side, like those last parting thoughts. And that's kind of a big question to put on you, but just kind of thinking back to 12 months ago, you might have been like just viewing this exact evening, and now you're in this new space. What might you share?
I would just say that in the same way that it's been nice and reassuring to hear these parents share their children's journey. We're fortunate that we're in touch with a number of our kids' friends, families from Carroll, and what you're hearing here is echoed by many other families. And so all to say, no matter where your kiddo ends up, um, there's a very similar story that threads through. That if you like, if Charlene had invited a bunch of families from last year to come, that you would be hearing a very similar story. So I'll just say, like, there's a reassurance. No matter where your child ends up, they're going to be just fine. They're getting set up for success now, and like really just trust the process. And it feels super duper overwhelming at this point, but it gets better.
Thank you. Anyone else? And it can be
Uh,
even about specifics. It could be about like the revisit days, or it could be about something else. So anything you wanna share.
I, I'd say we hit on this early, but I want to highlight it. Go to the different schools when you've narrowed it down to um, whatever. When we narrowed it down to maybe six, and so maybe not that narrow. And we went to each, and we talked to teachers, we talked to support, we talked to students. And honestly, I think our impression going into each one of those six schools and then when we left was slightly different and not necessarily negative on the five that we didn't choose. But we learned something, I think, very important every time we did it. And so I can't underemphasize. I think it's very important to go and talk to people and experience it with your unit, whoever that is, you know, your child and your family and see how it fits.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Dave.
I'll emphasize, Charlene, you touched upon the revisit days. For us, that was a big one. I feel like you can visit the school and do a tour, and for my son, an entry point in getting him to look at schools was to go to a athletic game of some sort and interact with students there and see what the culture was like there. But there's no replacement for actually being in the classroom environment and meeting other students in that setting. So I think that helps to solidify their understanding, positively or negatively, about how they feel about a given school. So I'm a big advocate of that experience.
Wonderful. Thank you. Sage.
And I'll echo the revisit days. We visited a number of schools like 12 months ago in the fall. And then by the time we had revisits in early spring, mud season, I think it even snowed on one of our revisits in the end of March going up to Proctor. It was snowing. I was like, oh, wow, this is awesome. We love the snow, but your kids are very different that's a long time. Our family's very, like things change. So the visits are really, really important. And be patient. I'm not always myself a patient person. You might feel you have a huge to-do list in front of you, but just chunk it out like we tell our kids to do it. Just chunk it out and know that, you're not going to you're not going to get your admissions answers or decide or have your IEP fully developed. You want the cake to bake to the full temperature, right? You don't want to have a half-baked cake. Be patient.
Thank you. Lauren, did you want to add anything? No, that was a great feedback early on. I just wanted to ask Scott if you had any other input on that Carroll middle school to upper school kind of decision-making process for any of the families that are in that space where they have the upper school as a possibility. There are some who have already perhaps made that decision that it's a fit for them, and some yet to be seen, but kind of just exploring all those options, some of the things you took into consideration. I know you talked about like we're on the cusp of some other big moments for Brendan.
Sure. Yeah, happy to. I think looking back on 2 years ago, that decision, I think that there was probably from Brendan, just the blinders were on of I'm leaving Carroll because I think so many of his peer group were moving on. That the thought of going to the Carroll Upper School was not high on his list, and I think that that was an area as a parent that I'm glad we continued to go there, raise the topic, discuss kind of what that experience could be. And again, going back to one of our, I think all four of us said, involving your child in the decision making. We certainly didn't force him to go to the Carroll Upper School, but we laid out the groundwork of what that experience could be and it could lead to beyond the Carroll Upper School. And so I would not discount that. If your child is resisting considering it, I think it may still, for us, it was certainly worthy of exploration. Doesn't mean you have to go that path, but don't discount it because your kid's saying, "Hey, I've spent, in our case, 8 years already at the Carroll School. I don't want to do another year," because it could really lead to very positive things for your child.
Thanks, Scott. I also remember, I think it was in November, so this is before, well before you made that decision, when you were thinking of schools that would provide the support and be a good fit, you were thinking some boarding at that time. And then I remember one day, I think your wife said, he's just not ready for that now. Like, so like he just was like, I love my bed. Like, this is where I want to be right now. And so there were so many factors involved, like just at that age, right? And so now you look a year and a half later, really, like a year later, really, and then what that looks like different. And not that it's a boarding, but just who that student was then and now who the student is now.
He's matured physically and he's matured academically, in that year, and
Yeah.
it prepared him for probably quite a different path had he just left Carroll after 8th grade. And we think it was all for the positive. It was not a easy decision, and it wasn't an easy transition. But once we got beyond that, it turned out to be an amazingly positive experience for all of us.
Thank you. And thank you all. I honestly, if I could just like encapsulate like all the points into just a few sentences, I would right now. I know I have like other advice that I had like jotted down from other parents who had shared things from both last year, this year, believe in your students in the process, enjoy the ride. Wish one parent last year, I wish they had more, they personally had more fun because they were also like very intent, like thinking about it and just to like enjoy it as much as you want your children to enjoy it and compliment your child throughout the process. um Someone else had told me they would give anything to go back and do it again with the knowledge they have. I don't know if everybody wants to do it again, but maybe like the idea with the knowledge. Do sit down maybe with your student and have some pros and cons, maybe a list, listen to what they're saying. Um, and then learning about your student during this process, like taking the opportunity to learn who they are becoming during all of this and who they are in October, November. They're going to be a little bit different come March, April, May. So I would love again to stay here and continue this discussion because I'm always like invigorated. My heart is full. But I think in the essence of time and appreciating all that you've done this evening and for our families in the audience, um, thank you for sharing and all the stories, your journey, your students' journey, being so vulnerable and honest and authentic tonight, because this is how we're all learning at Carroll. And I know that if families have questions, we can come to you just to reach back out. And Dave, Lauren, Sage, Scott, thank you so much. And we're so happy for your students and all the success. And guess I'm just going to say goodbye from secondary school advising and for the evening. Thank you.